Imagine the jugular vein of the global energy market being deadlocked in less than 24 hours. This is no military drill, but the cold reality currently playing out in the Strait of Hormuz. Just as Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif painstakingly brokered a fragile 2-week ceasefire window, the tense nerves of the world barely had a moment of relief. However, this tranquility was fleeting. A blockade order from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps directly locked down this global energy choke point once again. According to news on April 9th, maritime traffic tracking systems captured a highly symbolic and chilling scene. The giant oil tanker Arrow, originally sailing smoothly toward the strait exit, suddenly changed course near the coast of the Musandam Peninsula in Oman, as if chased by death, completing a resolute 180-degree death U-turn and fleeing at full speed deep into the Persian Gulf. To understand the terror of this turn, we must see through the underlying cards. The Strait of Hormuz is only 21 miles at its narrowest, yet over 21 million barrels of crude oil pass through here daily, accounting for more than 20% of global seaborne oil consumption. Looking back at the tanker war era in the 1980s, similar blockade threats once caused maritime insurance rates to skyrocket by 400%, triggering a global economic tsunami. Therefore, the glaring arc drawn by the Arrow on the radar screen not only ruthlessly slashed the diplomatic efforts painstakingly built by Pakistan, but also caused the recently retracted international oil prices to skyrocket in a straight line. Again, in this game, the global capital market is like a blindfolded beast tied to the tracks, and the geopolitical revenge train is approaching at full speed. On the cruel Middle Eastern poker table, oil is never just a commodity for trade. It is the ultimate chip that drags the entire world into the abyss. Why did a seemingly hopeful ceasefire mediation collapse so tragically? To find the answer, we must turn our gaze from the waves of the Persian Gulf to the smoking ruins of Lebanon. On April 8th, Israeli fighter jets tore through the skies of Lebanon, 254 dead, 1,165 injured. This is absolutely not just a cold casualty report, but a blood-stained ledger that completely shatters the illusion of peace. Long before Iran and the U.S. sat down at the negotiating table, the cornerstone maintaining the balance had already been pulled away. Iranian Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf astutely pointed out that among the 10 truce proposals previously drafted by the U.S. and Iran, 3 key clauses suffered fatal destruction. The absolute core among them, the first clause, was a comprehensive ceasefire in Lebanon. This commitment had originally been written into the negotiation framework in black and white by Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz. However, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who is well versed in the art of political survival, threw out an extremely dangerous exclusion clause. While verbally agreeing to regional de-escalation, he coldly announced that the ceasefire absolutely does not include Lebanon. Why did he detonate this bomb at this critical juncture? This is by no means a purely military consideration. If you see through the current political landscape of Jerusalem, you will understand that Netanyahu is tightly kidnapped by the domestic far-right ruling coalition, and he must rely on maintaining a state of war to extend his political life. Throughout history, Israel has been extremely adept at this tactic of fighting to promote peace or creating brinkmanship conflicts, attempting to force superpowers to reset their bottom lines by unilaterally flipping the table. But in the view of Tehran, this is not only a naked infringement on the sovereignty of Lebanon, but also a blatant trampling on the tacit agreement for regional de-escalation. The document filled with visions of peace was thus shattered into pieces as the most direct reciprocal punishment. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps did not hesitate for a moment, immediately announcing the suspension of cruise and tanker traffic in the strait. In the deceitful casino of geopolitics, a peace agreement with reservations is nothing more than a declaration of war printed on a white flag. When the gates of the Strait of Hormuz crashed down, Tehran essentially tossed a politically primed grenade directly back into the Oval Office in Washington. At this moment, the United States is plunging into unprecedented strategic anxiety. Soon, U.S. Vice President Vance issued an unusually tough statement claiming that any ceasefire agreement must have the unconditional and safe opening of the strait as an absolute prerequisite. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt quickly followed suit to draw a red line, emphasizing that this is the non-negotiable bottom line for the U.S. to accept negotiations. But the tough exterior of Washington cannot hide an embarrassing reality. The superpower has lost absolute binding power over its #1 ally in the Middle East. The boundary-crossing rampage of Israel forces the U.S. to swallow the bitter pill, while Iran uses the deadliest chokehold tactic to declare to the world that the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a safe zone for free navigation. The deeper reason for this anxiety lies in the fragile economic nerves of the United States. Let us look at a set of cruel data. For every $10 increase in crude oil prices, the domestic CPI in the United States will be pulled up by at least 0.2%. If the strait is blockaded long-term and oil prices soar past the psychological barrier of $100 per barrel, gas stations across the U.S. will instantly become powder kegs of public fury. Previously, President Trump, for the sake of the bigger picture, indeed suspended the final ultimatum against Iran. But under the dual strangulation of political votes and the inflation monster, if the domestic economy faces collapse, this president known for his fierce style is highly likely to be cornered, forcing him to tear up that tacit agreement called geopolitical patience and restart the ultimate military strike against Iran. Ultimately, the real prey of the chain of schemes by Israel in bombing Lebanon has never been Beirut, but Washington. Tel Aviv is trying to use the flames of war as chains to forcibly drag the United States back into the quagmire of war with Iran. In the twilight of imperial hegemony, what crushes a superpower is often not the aircraft carriers of its opponents, but the frantically jumping inflation numbers on domestic meters. Undoubtedly, the strategic intentions of Tel Aviv have become abundantly clear. Israel is attempting to use the ruins of Lebanon as a sacrifice to forcefully drag the superpower into an all-out war against Tehran. The counter-strategy of Iran is equally cold and precise, which is to control the strait and protect allies, using the jugular vein of the global economy to conduct a high-stakes reciprocal deterrence. So is the death U-turn of the arrow right now just a brief warning stoppage, or the terrifying prelude to a long-term strategic blockade? To answer this question, we must turn the clock back to the 1980s. In that bloody meat grinder known as the Tanker War, Iran relied solely on rudimentary moored mines and a few armed speedboats to make the entire Persian Gulf jittery, ultimately forcing the United States to launch Operation Earnest Will, the largest naval escort operation since World War II. Today, guarding both sides of the strait are no longer old speedboats, but Fate 110 ballistic missile positions hidden deep in the Zagros Mountains, Shahed drone swarms capable of instantly saturating aircraft carrier strike groups, and Nor anti-ship missiles with a range of over 120 kilometers. The chips in this game have multiplied tenfold, and the devastating deterrent power brought by blockading the strait has exploded exponentially. Today, when both sides have completely torn up their bottom lines and lost even a shred of basic mutual trust, let us look back at the ceasefire negotiations originally scheduled to be held in Pakistan on April 10th or 11th. The fate of this peace summit, originally pinned with high hopes by the global market, was actually sealed long ago. It will not give birth to any substantive de-escalation agreement, and is destined to be reduced to a war of words full of hypocritical accusations and political buck passing. Because that fragile negotiating table was completely overturned by the missiles of Lebanon and the waves of the Strait of Hormuz long ago. In a geopolitical prisoner's dilemma devoid of reverence, so-called peace negotiations are often just time bought by politicians to reload ammunition for the next, more violent slaughter. The red lines of major powers often appear so fragile amidst the ruins of small nations and the waves of straits. The lifeline of global energy ultimately hinges on a few missiles falling on Lebanon and the course of a single oil tanker. In this era where pulling one hair moves the whole body, when the gears of war begin to mesh, no major power can truly remain unscathed. This is no longer just a Middle Eastern grievance. This is the ultimate interrogation of the global order. If you too have seen the undercurrents beneath this strait crisis, please leave your independent thoughts in the comments section and like and subscribe to The Red Line. In a chaotic world, we only provide the coldest truths.